Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Rich Shortall. I'm the Executive Coordinator of Fire Safe Marin. This is our third in a series of webinars/workshops. We're calling them workshops because these are really meant to give the various regions that are part of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority to talk about the projects that they've been working on during the last year. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from Central Marin, and they're going to talk about the projects that they've done in the last year. And the real focus, like with everybody, is on this concept of adapting to wildfire. We all know that we are essentially living with wildfire. We're taking what we call a house out approach to that. Everything fits into that. And that's really been the theme that we're all working on this year. There is an opportunity for members of the audience to ask questions. And the best way to do that is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A function. Just type in your message in there and we'll get to it right after the presentation. So speaking of the presenters, tonight I have Battalion Chief Todd Lando from the Central Marin Fire Department, who's going to talk to us about the projects that have been done in the Central Marin area. Todd, welcome.
Thanks for the intro, Rich. Yeah, happy to be here and happy to present a real short overview of the fiscal year 21-22 projects that were completed by the fire agencies in the MWPA Central Marin zone. Pretty important to differentiate. Although I work for Central Marin Fire Department, my agency protects the town of Corte, Madera, and the city of Larkspur. But the Central Marin MWPA zone is made up of Central Marin Fire Department, also Kentfield Fire Protection District, which protects parts of Greenbrae and Kentfield proper, the unincorporated areas. We're also represented by Ross Valley Fire Department, which protects the town of Ross, town of San Anselmo, town of Fairfax, and the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. And then we also work cooperatively with Marin County Fire Department, which does have some responsibility in this central zone, unincorporated areas surrounding those towns. So when I talk about this, I'm going to be presenting things holistically as though we all work together, which we do. We really, we work cooperatively. Representatives from all of these agencies work together every day. We plan projects as though there are no jurisdictional boundaries, as though we're a wildfire, which doesn't respect jurisdictions. It's a really important approach, and it's unique in the MWPA. We're the only zone of the 5 MWPA zones where we have multiple agencies responsible for fire protection and responsible for managing the funds and the projects funded by the MWPA. So I'm going to share some slides here from a PowerPoint presentation that will help give us a little bit of an overview. Just a quick look, confirm, Rich, that you can see my screen. Looks like
Got it, Todd. Looks good. Thank you.
Okay, good. So in the 21-22, between these agencies, we shared from the MWPA funding about $4.5 million in funding. It divided up like all of the MWPA zones according to the way the tax measure was written in the organization structured. About 20% of the funding, exactly 20% of the funding, goes to local projects. 20% is dedicated to defensible space evaluations, inspections, and enforcement. And then about 60% are divided up into the what we call the core projects. These are larger scale projects that affect the entire region and that are usually worked on cooperatively by multiple agencies. I'm going to open up by really focusing on what we consider our flagship program. That's our Defensible Space Inspection Program. Each of the zones in the MWPA are tasked with completing defensible space evaluations. Even across the zones, we work cooperatively. We've developed unique software and data tracking that's countywide. Everyone in Marin is adopting this and using this. But each zone has taken into regional differences and a regional approach to really focus on the individual communities that can vary quite a bit across Marin. So the central zone has adopted a seasonal defensible space inspection program where we bring on a number of defensible space inspectors. This year we've got 26 full-time seasonal inspectors. They'll be working for about 9 months, really focusing on work during the fire season when vegetation management's critical. And we have 3 full-time staff members, year-round staff members who are dedicated to this program, and they manage and lead the program. And just some stats that I think are important to understand and impressive, really, when you look at what's happening in Marin and look at what's happening across the rest of the state. In the Central Marin zone alone, we've completed 18,655 defensible space inspections. We've identified almost 300,000 hazardous issues in the defensible space zones around residential structures. We've conducted almost 4,000, 3,800 high priority re-inspections. These are properties that had significant issues that really needed extra attention. And we've completed about 328, at least as of this afternoon, voluntary abatements. These are cooperative abatements where we've approached the property owners. We've identified people who might need extra assistance. Some properties that have significant egregious even issues or other reasons why the property owner might need assistance correcting defensible space issues, reducing vegetation, and reducing fire hazards on property that they own. This is just an astronomical increase over what we've ever done in the past, and it puts just the Central Marin zone on par with any county in the state of California. In fact, far ahead of most counties on the number of inspections we're completing, the number of follow-ups, the number of abatements. So that this is really, it's forward-thinking in the most positive way possible. It's an aggressive program that's really seeking to find vegetation management, home hardening issues, identify them, help people understand them, and help residents correct the issues. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that it was the Central Marin zone that really spearheaded the effort to develop the Fireside Defensible Space Inspection app, which is an iOS-based app developed by local software developers. They've helped us create an app that our inspectors use to identify problems in the field and then translate these issues that we discover on individual properties into a very readable, easily accessible online report that residents and homeowners can use to view the problems that we've identified, understand how to fix those issues, and then report back to us when a resident does actually address the problem. So if a resident learns that they have dry grasses and weeds around their property that put them at risk, they have an opportunity to learn how to fix that problem, and then they can take a photograph in 1 or 2 clicks, submit a resolution back to us that lets our inspectors know that that resident has now fixed the problem. It's a fantastic piece of software that's really helped us bring our program into the 21st century. And without it, we simply couldn't record all of these issues. And it also provides us data on where the fire hazards in our community are located. We're already using this type of data to help our firefighters when they're on the ground fighting fires, understand the spatial issues, understand where the highest hazards are, and improve the way we fight fires, definitely improve the way we prevent fires. So the other programs that we've identified and funded through the MWPA are focused on the core areas, the local funding. And we've divided our programs up into really programs that address defensible space or vegetation management on a regional scale. We call these either our hazardous and invasive vegetation management program, our shaded fuel break program, and a variety of others. These are funded from the 60% pot of money, primarily from the MWPA. And I'm going to give you some before and after photos of projects that were completed in the last 12 months. These photographs are from the Central Marin zone, but I don't want to discount my colleagues. Kentfield, Ross Valley completed a huge number of projects in this last year, over 180 individual projects in the Ross Valley alone. And the photographs that I have are all from my agency. They're photos I took, but I'm going to share these. And regardless of where you lived in the Ross Valley or Central Marin, you've had similar work done in your neighborhood. So this is the Citron Bowl open space area in the city of Larkspur. You can see a huge transformation here where we reduced hazardous fuels an accumulation of invasive white acacias, French broom, and decades of dead and down debris that had accumulated in this meadow. We worked with Open Space as our partner to do this, and it's an ongoing project that will see maintenance each year, probably for the next decade. Well, we focused a lot of energy on evacuation routes, locations, creating shaded fuel breaks around particularly vulnerable neighborhoods. This is the Palm Hill neighborhood in Larkspur, where we reduced the growth of French broom, invasive plants, restored native oak and bay tree habitat, and really reduced the fire hazard significantly for a neighborhood that's at particular risk in Larkspur. This is another look at that similar location where we reduced vegetation and helped restore natural conditions that are much more fire resilient. Here's a look, a little closer detail of some of the broom and brush removal work we've done. The Corte Madera Ridge and the top of Christmas Tree Hill is probably one of the most wildfire vulnerable locations in Marin County. And we've done a huge amount of work here, both enhancing the evacuation routes for residents, dramatically improving the ingress routes where fire engines can access this neighborhood. This is one of the communities that has the most, probably the most difficult evacuation problem during a wildfire in Marin. And we focused on the ability to send fire engines in via fire roads, via dirt roads, where firefighters can take risk to protect the neighborhood, but allow residents to take the safest route possible down the pavement without the fear of running into fire engines that are coming up the hill while they're trying to evacuate. Dramatic reduction in vegetation fuel. Here's another look at another part of Christmas Tree Hill where we reduced vegetation alongside the roadway and around some critical infrastructure. In the background here, you'll be able to see this is a radio communication tower that has cellular infrastructure that serves Corte Madera, Larkspur, and Mill Valley, a really important communication site, and a site where some of the fire radios actually are located that help us communicate during fires. So we created defensible space, reduced vegetation, and improved the access for fire engines, and also improved the evacuation route for a couple of houses that live right at this critical location. Our evacuation route work, this is a photograph. This is actually a fire engine that was responding to a real wildfire at the time this photograph was taken. You can see on the left-hand side how narrow the roadway was, how difficult the access was. The fire engine could barely make it down the road, and it was all non-native invasive vegetation, plants that aren't supposed to be there, that were creating the access issue. We were able to restore native plants, restore native grasses and wildflowers, and enhance the native oak trees that ought to have been there while reducing the impediment on the roadway. So this was a successful project that spanned 3 jurisdictions between Larkspur, Kentfield, and the city of San Rafael. Importantly, and I'll wrap up with this, I want to talk a little bit about our biggest project, both in terms of work that we completed last year and what we're going to do in the future. This is our Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. We expended almost $250,000 last year on the planning and implementation and environmental review for this project. This is an effort to create a 38-mile-long shaded fuel break around the perimeter of the community. It's within 200 feet of houses that lie at the edge of all of the Ross Valley communities, from Corte Madera to Fairfax on the western edge, and then Sleepy Hollow and parts of Fairfax, parts of San Anselmo on the eastern edge of the community. We're going to reduce dead and down vegetation. We're going to reduce invasive vegetation like French broom and Scotch broom. We'll work on treating eucalyptus groves, dead oak trees that have accumulated over the last 30 years, really focusing on this area closest to homes to create a safe buffer where firefighters can protect the community and hopefully prevent a wildfire in the wildlands outside of the neighborhoods from ever entering the community, where it can burn multiple structures like we've seen so frequently in the last decade. We're going to treat about 1,100 acres of land when we complete this over the next 3 years. It'll touch almost 1,700 individual parcels, public parcels like open space lands, MMWD lands, other local park lands, and a huge number of individual residential parcels. We think that this project is going to cost about $6 million to complete, and about half of that funding will come from local tax dollars from Measure C funds from the Corte in the Central Zone, and the other $3.25 million is going to come from a CAL FIRE grant, which we learned was awarded to us just last week. This is going to allow us to hit the ground running and get this work done quickly to provide the most protection we can to the community. Here's a zoomed in image of parts of the fuel break in some critical locations in Larkspur and Corte, Madera, and a look at how this fuel break will surround communities that are right at the edge of the wildlands. That these areas, the blue areas or purple areas are locations within 100 feet of structures. The orange areas are within 200 feet of structures, and the pink zone is area that we may or may not touch depending on what hazard our crews actually find on the ground when they're doing this work. So it's an important project. It'll be the biggest project of its type to be undertaken by the MWPA. It's going to cross a lot of boundaries, and it'll do a tremendous amount of good for the community.
Well, Todd, that's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Really exciting. Hard to even know where to start, but I think looking at maybe from the big picture for a moment, when we look at the shaded fuel breaks, I think the before and after pictures are really persuasive. And I kind of want to get your opinion about this. When we're reducing the fuels, is that also promoting forest health at the same time?
Tremendously, yeah. I mean, we've known for a long time that no living person has ever seen Marin's forest in a healthy state. Frankly, ever since the Europeans arrived here, we've created conditions in our forests either through increased development, other demands on the land, a lot of fire suppression, introduction of invasive plants. We've created these conditions that are really unhealthy. So our goal is to restore healthy native conditions like you might have found here 200 years ago, because those are much more fire resilient conditions. A healthy forest is much less likely to see a catastrophic destructive fire than the conditions we see today.
Well, that's really very positive. Before I forget, I do want to remind the audience members that you're welcome to ask questions. Just use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I guess the second thing that we saw in those larger projects is the focus on evacuation routes. And it's sort of two-pronged. One is so that people can get out, but that picture of the fire engine trying to get through all of that brush and then the improvements you made later. So can you talk about where all that stands in the big scheme of things, evacuation routes?
Yeah, evacuation route access is one of our priorities and has been since we conceived the idea of the MWPA. We know that decades of growth have impeded roadways in Marin. Fire engines, frankly, have gotten a lot bigger over the last 100 years. So we need more access than ever. Residents now have more cars than ever. And we recognize that we have narrow roads that were built in the early 1900s when cars were smaller, when many people accessed their neighborhoods on foot rather than by car. So access and egress is just a critical issue for us. We know the places where fire engines have difficult access. We know which locations we're likely to run into residents who are trying to evacuate during a wildfire. We're aware of those issues and have actively worked to identify the roadways that need the most work, the places and locations along roads where vegetation either threatens the road because it might burn and put people at risk while they're evacuating, or where we might see choke points because vegetation's overhanging the road. Our goal is to get all of our roadways to meet the California Fire Code standards, which we've all adopted here, which is we need to have 15 feet of clearance over the top of the roadways, and we need about 10 feet of clearance on the side of the roadways. That doesn't mean no vegetation at all, but it means we shouldn't see any dead vegetation, any hazardous vegetation that might burn during a wildfire. We want to see native plants and trees alongside our roadways. We know that's an important part of the character of the community, but we need to reduce that overgrowth and the buildup that's occurred over the last decades.
That's great. When you're doing that type of work, I imagine sometimes it comes up against private property. So is this also serve as an incentive, or is there an opportunity to encourage residents to do their part with defensible space when all this is taking place?
Yeah, all of these programs work hand in hand. So our defensible space inspectors are out actively identifying places where residents have let the maintenance go on their property to help them understand what their responsibility is. And then we do have opportunities with this program to help residents catch up with some of the deferred maintenance they might have left on their property. So we do work on private property with the property owner's permission. It's important to point out that we're not adopting these roadways and other people's vegetation. The MWPA cannot maintain this forever, but we can help residents in a lot of cases catch up with that deferred maintenance and make it easier for the property owner to maintain their land in the long run.
Yeah. Well, for myself, growing up in Marin, I've seen the change in our forests out here. And you see some of those photos where the amount of growth of non-natives and all the rest of that, and then fallen limbs subject, the sudden oak death, etc., build up. We clear all that out. How often do you think we'll have to come back to keep those areas maintained?
The reality is most of the places that we're concerned about, especially around structures and along roadways, require some kind of annual maintenance. But as long as we keep up with it, we're talking about a 1 or 2 day sort of weekend spring cleanup each year rather than intensive vegetation management. So we get ourselves caught up. I would expect that a small amount of annual maintenance is necessary. And then probably every 3 to 5 years, a little bit more intensive work that might require a little bit of tree work to remove dead limbs, possibly remove trees that have died. Our trees are suffering from the drought, and as they die, we do need to remove that dead wood and remove the dead trees. We need to remove leaf litter and debris that falls out of the trees during our winter storms, pick that up off the ground. That's part of the process of improving the forest health and really reducing the amount of fuel that's available to a wildfire.
Great. Well, I live in Central Marin, and I recently had my home evaluated by the DSpace inspectors. They were wonderful, very polite, did a really good job explaining, but I was really impressed with the form. What kind of feedback are you getting from the public about that form? Helpful? They like it?
Yeah, by and large, it's very helpful. I think the feedback we get, probably 99% of it is positive. It's a dramatic improvement in the amount of information we've shared over what we shared in the past, which was a simple 1-page paper form that was really pretty hard to decipher. We provide photographs and maps and locations and helpful instructions, links back to Fire Safe Marin so that you can find building contractors to fix issues we might find on your home, and landscape contractors that can help you with defensible space issues. It's just a great application. We do get some negative feedback though, but it's really kind of usually centered around the idea that people are shocked and surprised at the issues we find. Sometimes I think people are a little embarrassed that our inspectors are able to come onto a property that the owner might have thought was just fine, and we're able to find a lot of issues sometimes. So we give people a pretty long list every now and then of issues that need to be addressed on their property. And frankly, some people are surprised that a lot of these issues, especially the defensible space vegetation management issues, are required by law. Well, we've heard from a lot of people who ask us, when was this law passed? How can you make me do this stuff? And our goal is to make this cooperative. We're not law enforcement officers in general. We didn't get in the fire service to enforce the fire code. We want to make the community safer, but we want people to know that these laws have been on the book for a long time. We apologize if you weren't aware of the fact that you need to maintain your land to reduce the wildfire risk, but we're looking at laws in some cases that have been on the books in Marin County for over 100 years, maintaining the grasses around your home, for example. And then more intensive work has been required since 1965 in California.
So I'm going to make a little pitch for a great video that you created that you can find, excuse me, sorry about that, that you can find on our YouTube channel, and where you walk through that report page by page and really explain in detail just how it works. So anybody who wants to know more about it, go to the Fire Safe Marin YouTube channel and check out Todd's presentation. But one of the best features on there is you get this, it could be a little bit overwhelming for the homeowner, but there's a feature on there about grants and grant assistance. How's that all work?
Yeah, so the MWPA offers grants. Each zone in the JPA offers a dollar amount, set amount of funding It's available to any property owner within the MWPA. We're focusing and want to focus most of the work on those people that are most at risk. But anybody who pays the tax potentially has access to it if we are able to identify vulnerabilities on your property. So once you've had an inspection, you'll see on the inspection report that there's a link alongside each individual discovery we've made. If that issue is something that the MWPA can fund, those are any defensible space vegetation management issues and quite a few of the home hardening issues. There's a direct link. It's a one-click link that will let you apply for a grant. A small amount of documentation is required. It only takes a few minutes to complete, and you can get right now up to $1,000 cash back as a matching grant towards work that you complete on your property. And we really want people to take advantage of that. There will be an increase in the dollar amount available sometime in the future, but right now $1,000 can really help a lot of our residents who are most at need get this work done.
It's that grant program from the MWPA is really fantastic, and the way you can access it so easily through the report is wonderful. I have a question, and I'm going to read the question because I'm not quite sure how best we can answer it. But somebody like to know, if we want the DSpace inspectors to return, how do we do that?
So it sounds like they want them to return after we've completed an initial inspection. And I'll tell you that we're working on a reinspection program. We've already reinspected several thousand properties in the Ross Valley. We don't have the resources right now to re-inspect every single property. So that's why we're asking residents to self-report using the online form itself to let us know when they've fixed issues. In Larkspur and Corte, Madera, we're beta testing our re-inspection program. It's been really successful. We find much greater results when we knock on people's door a second time. But right now, we unfortunately are not taking scheduled requests for re-inspections. That's part of our program. But I think as you see this program evolve over time, probably next year, you'll see many more re-inspections. And our goal is to eventually re-inspect every property at least once each year. So that would mean that you would see the inspectors twice. It's important to point out when we do return for a reinspection, many people have not corrected issues yet. We need your help getting that work done. If you live in the Ross Valley and you've had an inspection, you've got 30 days to complete it, and that's what the law says. So when we return it, it's really helpful to us if you've completed all of that work. If you haven't, we can grant extensions, and we want to work with people. But we're hearing from a lot of people, frankly, who are surprised that we came back for a second inspection. I think over the years, they've grown accustomed to us not returning and felt that somehow meant that these things were optional, but that was never the case.
Yeah, I just would add to that right now we're sort of on a cycle. And if you're I live in Sleepy Hollow, for example, so we can expect every 2 to 3 years that the inspectors who go through that may increase in the future, which is a little bit different than they came. And can they come back again a week or two later or a month later? So
exactly. Yeah.
Sort of two different things.
We're happy that a lot of people want to share with us their progress. And the way to do that is through that online form. And we review every single submission that a resident makes when they tell us that they've completed an issue.
That's great. So I have 2 remaining questions. One is, of all this work that's taken place in the last year, what are you most excited about?
I think I speak for all my colleagues that we're most excited about this Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break. It's a really unique project. It's a big scale project that crosses a lot of boundaries. It's going to make a huge impact on wildfire resilience in the community. It's not going to solve our wildfire problem, but it gives us some new tools and adds a layer of safety that we've never had before since we started building homes here.
So as my follow-up, I think it just got answered. What are you most excited about looking forward to? And this is a multi-year project. So
yeah. We got through in this past year, we got through the environmental review process, which we use the California Vegetation Treatment Program, EIR, which is just a fantastic tool to make sure that all the work we do is planned with a minimal environmental impact, and that we understand what impacts there are and mitigate any potential impacts going forward. So we're thrilled that we got through that process, and we have a fantastic environmentally sensitive plan moving forward that's going to improve the health of our forests in our community and reduce risk.
Well, that's great. Well, Todd, is there anything you'd like to add before we close?
No, Rich, I really appreciate the invitation to be here. Love Fire Safe Marin, and I'm proud of this organization. So thanks for all of your help.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Todd. We really appreciate your taking the time. Very exciting presentation. Lots of good work going on. And I do want to thank all the members of the public who attended. We are recording this, and the recording will be available. And then at the end, there's 5 of these workshops, and we'll be combining sections of each to make sort of a highlights reel of all the great work the MWPA has done last year. So with that, I say goodnight to everybody. Thank you so much. Again, appreciate it, Todd, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Rich.